one of my favorite painters also, who is not as well known, but he's moving up in the pantheon of Impressionists, Caillebotte. Okay, Gustave Caillebotte. Caillebotte was two things. He was a painter, and he did this painting of the Pont Neuf. If you look up from the Gare, no, Pont de l'Europe, sorry. If you look up from the Gare Saint-Lazare, that's what you see, that iron bridge. And what he's doing is celebrating the iron of modernity. In other words, the Eiffel Tower will succeed this. Okay, and the Eiffel Tower, of course, is partly important because of not even how it is shaped, but what it is shaped of. That is the materials that it is used. And he has the middle-class strollers here, a workman looking down, and he introduces a new character that Baudelaire identified. He's called the flaneur. Okay, the verb flâner, with a circumflex over the A, may I note, in French means to stroll. And the flaneur is a stroller, somebody who is an urban, what does he do? He wanders around the urban turf and watches people. He's of the city and apart from the city at the same time. I don't know if you do this, I do it every so often, and I find it fascinating and wonderfully interesting. Parisians are experts at it. Okay, you sit in the cafe and you just watch things go by, and that tells you a lot about humanity because you observe in a different kind of way. And the interesting part is you're two things minimally at once. You're part of the theater of the city, and because of your consciousness, it's modern consciousness, you're watching yourself being part of the theater of the city. Just like now, you're sitting in on a lecture and saying, I'm sitting in on a lecture. That is, you're conscious of what you're doing. And there is that self-consciousness. Now, I wanted to introduce it that way because, let me move this up, because I need the bottom of this. This is another Caillebotte. Called The Man at the Window. I'm going to move one forward just to give you an image of Caillebotte, and then we'll come back to it. You know the painting, of course, The Luncheon of the Boating Party, one of the most famous of all, and wondrous, the 3-hour lunch with your buddies, okay, in a wonderful place with wine and dogs and so on. This is Caillebotte. Okay, he was a friend of Renoir and the other Impressionists, and by the way, he's the only one who had some money. And his importance is not merely that he painted paintings, but his importance is that he bought some of paintings, and he subsidized them before they were popular. And they are all hanging now in the Musée d'Orsay, may I add. So wonderful stuff, because until they became popular, you know, one of their paintings sells these days for more than the whole bunch of them earned, you know, in all of their lifetime, of course. It is somewhat absurd, but I'll leave that alone. Okay, for the moment. Okay, that's, as I say, another lecture. But here, the man at the window. The man at the window has his chair facing the window. Okay, in other words, he's a watcher of the street. The street is partly his entertainment. Okay, please remember, no computers. Okay, no TV. Okay, you don't come into your house and turn on Big Brother. You know, I'm convinced George Orwell was wrong. Okay, in other words, Big Brother is not watching us, we watch Big Brother. Okay, that is, come on Big Brother, let's get into the house, you know. So none of that stuff. The street is a theater of sorts. As he stands above it in one of the new streets in Paris, I didn't tell you this, but many of you will know that Paris was seriously remade from 1850 to 1870. It's called a Haussmanization because Baron Haussmann was the major figure who was appointed by Napoleon III, Louis Napoleon Bonaparte, in order to do this. And not only was it remade, Vienna was remade, Barcelona, if any of you have been to Barcelona, the whole of the Eixample, the whole area where Gaudi did his stuff, it was all remade at the end of the 19th century. New York was remade. In other words, cities had to be remade to be modern, no more medieval streets, and so on and so forth. And Paris did probably better than any of them in terms of, maybe Barcelona, okay, but in terms of the beauty. And he's watching the figures down there. However, he has, as well, the shadow of the man at the window. Who is every man, may I note, because we don't know who he is, and we don't learn who he is. He's every man who is alone in the middle of the mass. There's a duality going on here, I want to argue. The shadow represents his inner life. This is not unusual. This is a very normal phenomenon. Jung did not invent it. That is, it's a very common trope in art. Okay, that is where you have the shadow in the mirror. It represents his inner life. And one of the reasons that Dracula doesn't see his shadow, okay, is because he's not human. Okay, 1897, and so on. But here is him as well as the shadow. In other words, he is looking at the world, but also contemplating looking at the world. He has modern consciousness. The term that's sometimes used in modernity is the divided self. That is, we have multiple selves, and those multiple selves are conscious and unconscious at any given moment. Now, what I'm trying to suggest is that what these guys are doing is just the beginning of trying to enter into the inner life of their subjects. In other words, it's more, I'm giving them more credit than they've gotten, okay? They not merely depict happy people doing happy things, okay, in parks and on sailboats and so on and so forth, but they have a profound sense that human nature is changing, okay, we all right with this, in response to this new environment and in response to modern consciousness.